The sound of a shotgun blast tore through the summer air as Prudence Norton stood in her once white wedding gown, now stained with dirt and her own tears. Her father's final words echoed in her mind as the stagecoach pulled away from the only home she'd ever known. "No daughter of mine gets left at the altar and comes back home." Sweetwater, Wyoming Territory, 1878. The dusty frontier town rose from the plains like a mirage as the stagecoach rattled to a stop. Prudence stepped down, her wedding dress the same one she'd been wearing for 3 days straight, drawing curious and judgmental stares from the locals. She clutched her small carpet bag, containing what little her father had allowed her to take: a hairbrush, a change of undergarments, and $5 to her name. "End of the line, miss," the driver called down, tossing her larger bag to the ground. "Welcome to Sweetwater." Prudence stood in the middle of the main street, the hot Wyoming sun beating down on her fair skin. 22 years old and completely alone for the first time in her life. She'd been raised in polite society back east, sheltered and groomed to be a perfect wife. Now she was just another piece of unwanted baggage, shipped west in disgrace after Harold Wilkinson had changed his mind at the last minute, leaving her standing alone in the church while the wedding guests whispered behind their hands. "You planning on blocking the street all day, or just till sundown?" A deep voice drawled behind her. She turned to face a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His dark blonde hair fell in waves beneath a worn Stetson, and several days' worth of stubble lined his strong jaw. Despite his rough appearance, there was something kind in those eyes. Prudence faltered, suddenly aware of how ridiculous she must look. "I apologize, I'm not entirely certain where I'm meant to go." The man's expression softened as he took in her wedding dress and the lost look in her hazel eyes. "You have any family here in Sweetwater?" "No," she admitted. "My father sent me here because it's far enough away that news of my disgrace won't follow." Understanding dawned on his face. "Left at the altar." Prudence felt her cheeks burn. "Is it that obvious?" "The dress was my first clue." He removed his hat, revealing more of that sun-streaked hair. "Name's Jackson Xavier. Most folks call me Jax. I own the Double X Ranch about 5 miles outside of town." "Prudence Norton," she replied, attempting a curtsy that nearly sent her tumbling into the dirt street. Jackson's quick reflexes saved her, his strong hand catching her elbow. "Careful there, Miss Norton. Looks like you've had a rough few days." His eyes traveled over her torn hem and the dark smudges beneath her eyes. "You got somewhere to stay?" "I was told there's a boarding house." Jackson shook his head. "Mrs. Holloway's place is full up with the railroad surveyors in town." He seemed to consider something for a moment before continuing. "My sister Emma lives in town, runs the dress shop. She's got a room above her store she sometimes rents out. Might be your best bet." Hope fluttered in Prudence's chest. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Xavier." "Jax," he corrected, lifting her bag. "Come on, I'll take you there. Emma's got a soft spot for strays." "I'm not a stray," Prudence protested, though the words lacked conviction even to her own ears. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "No, madam, you're certainly not." The dress shop sat on the corner of Main Street and Pine, a tidy building with large windows displaying the latest frontier fashions. A bell tinkled as Jackson pushed open the door, ushering Prudence inside. "Emma, you got a customer," Jackson called. A pretty woman with the same striking blue eyes as Jackson emerged from the back room, wiping her hands on her apron. Her blonde hair was pinned up in a practical style, and she wore a simple but elegant blue dress that showcased her skill with a needle and thread. "Jax, I wasn't expecting you in town today." She stopped short when she spotted Prudence. "Oh my. This is Miss Prudence Norton," Jackson explained. "She just arrived on the afternoon stage and needs a place to stay. Thought maybe your room might be available." Emma's gaze traveled over Prudence's bedraggled appearance, lingering on the wedding dress. Unlike the judging looks Prudence had received in the street, Emma's eyes held nothing but compassion. "Of course it is," Emma said warmly. "You poor thing, come with me, let's get you settled." "I can't pay much," Prudence admitted. "I only have $5 to my name." Emma waved away her concern. "We'll work something out, can you sew?" "Yes, quite well actually. My mother insisted. Then perhaps you can help me in the shop until you find your feet. Emma took Prudence's carpet bag from her brother. Jax, be a dear and bring her trunk upstairs. Jackson nodded and hefted the larger bag. I've got some business to attend to in town, but I'll check in before I head back to the ranch. The room above the dress shop was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the bustling Main Street. After days of travel, it looked like paradise to Prudence. The privy's out back, Emma explained, setting down the carpet bag. There's a bathhouse 2 doors down if you'd like to wash up proper. First thing, though, we need to get you out of that wedding dress. Prudence's fingers tightened on the fabric. It's all I have. Emma's expression softened. No, honey, it's what you're leaving behind. Wait here. She disappeared downstairs and returned a few minutes later with a simple calico dress in a soft shade of green. This was a commission that was never picked up. The measurements look about right for you. Tears welled in Prudence's eyes as she touched the fabric. I can't accept this. Consider it a loan until we sort things out. Emma helped her out of the wedding gown, carefully folding the satin and lace. Do you want to keep this? Prudence stared at the dress that had represented all her hopes and dreams. No, she said finally. I don't think I do. Emma nodded in understanding. I'll put it aside. You might feel differently later. The calico dress fit well enough, though it was a bit loose in the waist. After 3 days in a stagecoach wearing a corset and wedding dress, the simple garment felt like freedom. There, Emma said, stepping back to appraise her. You look much more suited to Sweetwater now. A knock at the door downstairs interrupted them. Emma excused herself and returned moments later with Jackson, who stopped short at the sight of Prudence in her new dress. Well now, he said, his voice a touch gruffer than before. That's a sight better than that wedding finery. Prudence felt her cheeks warm under his appreciative gaze. Your sister has been very kind. Emma's got a good heart, too good sometimes. He shot his sister a meaningful look that Prudence couldn't quite interpret. I've arranged for a hot bath for you at Widow Peterson's bathhouse. Thought you might appreciate it after your journey. That's very thoughtful, Mr. Xavier. Jax, he reminded her, and it's nothing. Consider it a proper welcome to Sweetwater. After Jackson left, Emma helped Prudence gather the necessary items for her bath. My brother seems quite taken with you, she observed casually. Surely not, Prudence protested. He's merely being kind to a stranger. Emma's knowing smile suggested otherwise. Jax doesn't pay for just anyone's bath at the Widow's. That place charges double what the men's bathhouse does. I'm sure he's simply being a gentleman. Oh, he is that, but he's also a man who knows what he wants when he sees it. Emma handed her a towel. Just something to consider while you're soaking away the dust of your journey. The hot bath was heavenly, washing away not just the dirt of travel, but some of the shame and heartache as well. Prudence sank into the steaming water and allowed herself, for the first time since that awful moment in the church, to think about her future rather than her past. Harold's rejection had been humiliating, yes, but as she reflected on their courtship, she realized it had been more about their family's expectations than any genuine affection between them. Perhaps, in a strange way, he had done her a favor. Here in Sweetwater, no one knew her as the disgraced bride. She could be anyone she wanted to be. By the time Prudence returned to the dress shop, the sun was beginning to set, painting the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Emma had prepared a simple supper of bread, cheese, and cold ham, which they ate at the small table in the back room of the shop. Tell me about your brother, Prudence said, curious despite herself. Has he lived here long? Emma buttered a slice of bread. Jax came out west after the war between the states. He was just a boy when he enlisted, lied about his age. What he saw changed him. He couldn't settle back into our life in Missouri afterward, so he headed west to make his fortune. And did he make his fortune, in his way? The double X isn't the biggest spread around, but it's growing. Jax works harder than any man I know. Emma took a sip of tea. He's a good man, my brother, loyal to a fault, stubborn as the day is long. He's not married, Prudence asked, trying to sound merely conversational. Emma's knowing smile returned. No, there have been interested parties, of course, but Jax is particular. Says he's waiting for someone who feels like home. She studied Prudence over her teacup. Now, enough about my brother. Tell me what brings a proper Eastern lady to our little corner of Wyoming." Prudence hesitated, then found herself telling Emma everything about the grand wedding that never happened, about Harold's last-minute change of heart, about her father's rage and her mother's tears. "They couldn't bear the scandal," she finished quietly. "Father has business associates in Cheyenne. He arranged for me to travel here, where no one would know the shame I brought on the family." "Shame?" Emma looked indignant. "What shame is there in being honest about your feelings?" "Sounds to me like this Harold did you a favor, even if his timing was abominable. That's not how society sees it back east. Well, you're not back east anymore. Out here, we judge folks by what they do, not by what's done to them." Emma reached across the table and squeezed Prudence's hand. "You've got a fresh start here if you want it." That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Prudence found herself thinking about Jackson Xavier's kind eyes and the way he'd looked at her in that green calico dress. It was far too soon to be noticing such things, she told herself firmly. She'd only just arrived, still nursing a broken heart. But as she drifted off to sleep, it wasn't Harold's face she saw behind her closed eyelids, but Jackson's. The next morning, Prudence woke to the sounds of Sweetwater coming to life. Wagons rattled down the street below, shopkeepers called greetings to one another, and somewhere a rooster crowed persistently. It was a far cry from the genteel quiet of her parents' neighborhood in Boston. She dressed in the green calico, pinned up her honey-brown hair as neatly as she could without her lady's maid, and went downstairs to find Emma already at work in the shop. "Good morning," Emma greeted her cheerfully. "Sleep well, better than I have in days," Prudence admitted. "How can I help in the shop today?" Emma set her to work straightening the bolts of fabric and organizing the notions, tasks Prudence found soothing in their simplicity. By mid-morning, the bell above the door jingled as their first customer entered, a matronly woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. "Emma Xavier, I hear you've taken in another stray," she announced without preamble, eyeing Prudence with undisguised curiosity. "Mrs. Perkins, good morning," Emma replied smoothly. "This is Miss Prudence Norton, recently arrived from Boston. Prudence, this is Mrs. Bertha Perkins, who knows everything that happens in Sweetwater before it happens." Mrs. Perkins sniffed but looked pleased at the description. "Boston, is it? What brings you all the way out here, girl? Running from something, I'll wager." Prudence felt her cheeks burn, but before she could respond, Emma intervened. "Prudence is my new assistant. She has an excellent eye for fashion and exquisite needlework." "Now, what can we help you with today, Mrs. Perkins? I believe your order of lace has arrived." While Emma distracted Mrs. Perkins with business, Prudence retreated to the back room, shaken by the encounter. Of course there would be gossip in a town this size. A newcomer was bound to cause speculation. She would need to develop a thicker skin if she was to make a life here. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of customers, each more curious than the last about the new girl from Boston. By noon, Prudence was exhausted from maintaining a polite smile in the face of increasingly pointed questions. "You handled that well," Emma said as they closed the shop for the midday meal. "Mrs. Perkins is the worst of them. The rest will lose interest once someone else does something scandalous." "Does that happen often?" Prudence asked. Sinking into a chair, Emma laughed. "Often enough. Last month it was the banker's wife running off with the piano player from the saloon. Month before that, it was Reverend Phillips getting caught with whiskey on his breath during Sunday service. A knock at the back door interrupted them. Emma opened it to reveal Jackson, hat in hand and a basket over his arm. "Thought you ladies might appreciate some lunch," he said, stepping inside. "Mrs. Garcia at the cantina made her special tamales today." "You're a saint, Jax," Emma declared, taking the basket. "We've been run off our feet all morning with nosy neighbors." Jackson's eyes found Prudence. "Town giving you trouble already, Miss Norton?" "Nothing I can't handle," she assured him, though her voice lacked conviction. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Folks around here can be curious to a fault, but they're decent once they get to know you." The tamales were delicious, spicy in a way that food in Boston never was. Prudence found herself enjoying the unfamiliar flavors as Jackson and Emma caught up on ranch business and local gossip. Marshall's looking for men to form a posse, Jackson mentioned between bites. Stage got robbed again yesterday, about 10 miles north of town. Emma frowned. That's the third time this month. Any leads? Not yet. Same pattern though, 2 men, faces covered, take the strongbox and any valuables from the passengers, then disappear into the hills. He glanced at Prudence. You're lucky your stage wasn't hit. The thought sent a chill through her. Does this happen often? More than we'd like, Jackson admitted. The railroad coming through has brought opportunities, but also some unsavory elements. Marshall does his best, but he's just one man. After lunch, Jackson helped Emma move some heavy bolts of fabric before preparing to leave. At the door, he paused and turned to Prudence. Almost forgot, I brought you something. From his saddlebag, he pulled a small package wrapped in brown paper. Noticed you didn't have much with you. Curious, Prudence unwrapped the package to find a small bottle of lavender water, a bar of fine soap, and a sturdy comb. It's not much, he said, suddenly looking uncertain. Emma mentioned you left in a hurry, thought you might need some. Lady things. Touched by his thoughtfulness, Prudence blinked back unexpected tears. Thank you, Mr. Xavier, this is very kind. Jax, he reminded her softly, and it's nothing, just a welcome gift. After he left, Emma raised an eyebrow at Prudence. Just being kind to a stranger, Prudence clutched the small gifts. Perhaps he's this considerate to everyone. If you believe that, I've got a bridge to sell you, Emma replied with a laugh. Now come on, we've got work to do. The afternoon brought more customers, including a young woman named Sarah Miller who was to be married in the fall and needed a wedding dress. Nothing too fancy, she explained, but I want to look pretty for Thomas. Prudence helped Emma take measurements, her thoughts drifting to her own abandoned wedding. The dress she'd left Boston in had cost more than most people in Sweetwater probably earned in a year, with its imported lace and seed pearls. Yet here was Sarah, glowing with happiness at the prospect of a simple gown made by Emma's skilled hands. What do you think, Prudence? Emma asked, interrupting her thoughts. The blue silk with the cream overlay or the ivory satin? Pushing aside her melancholy, Prudence considered the fabrics. The ivory would be traditional, but the blue would bring out her eyes beautifully. Perhaps a compromise. Ivory with blue accents. Sarah clapped her hands in delight. Oh, that sounds perfect. Thomas always says he fell in love with my eyes first. By the time the shop closed for the day, Prudence's feet ached, but she felt a sense of accomplishment she'd never experienced in her sheltered life in Boston. Here, her opinion mattered. Her skills were valued. It was a novel feeling and not an unpleasant one. Over supper that evening, Emma mentioned that the town was hosting a social the following weekend. It's to raise money for the new schoolhouse, she explained. There'll be dancing, food, games for the children. Everyone in town attends. That sounds lovely, but I don't think I should. Nonsense. It's the perfect opportunity for you to meet people properly, not just as curious customers. Emma fixed her with a determined look. Besides, Jax always attends these functions. He pretends it's his civic duty, but I think he secretly enjoys them. The thought of seeing Jackson again sent an unexpected flutter through Prudence's stomach. I don't have anything appropriate to wear. Emma's eyes lit up. Now that's a problem I can definitely solve. The next few days fell into a pattern. Prudence worked in the shop during the day, learning the business and helping customers. In the evenings, Emma began work on a new dress for her, a lovely creation in soft blue muslin with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs. You don't need to do this, Prudence protested as Emma fitted the bodice. Consider it part of your wages, Emma replied, pins between her teeth. Besides, I need my assistant to look presentable. Jackson visited the shop every other day, always with some small gift or treat, fresh strawberries from a farm outside town, a ribbon for her hair, once even a book of poetry he'd noticed in the general store window. You didn't strike me as a poetry man, Prudence teased when he presented her with the slim volume. A faint blush colored his tan cheeks. There's a lot you don't know about me yet, Miss Norton. Yet, the word hung between them, full of promise. On Friday afternoon, a week after Prudence's arrival in Sweetwater, the shop door burst open to admit a harried-looking man in a dust-covered suit. Emma, thank goodness you're open. I need your help urgently. He spotted Prudence and removed his hat. "Pardon me, miss." "I'm Dr. Franklin, town physician." "What's happened, Doc?" Emma asked, setting aside the bodice she was working on. "Mrs. Dumont's gone into labor 2 weeks early. Her mother's tending to her, but she's asking for you, says you promised to be there." Emma bit her lip, glancing between the doctor and Prudence. "I did promise, but I can mind the shop," Prudence offered. "You've shown me everything I need to know. Are you sure? What if there's a problem? I'll manage," Prudence assured her with more confidence than she felt. "Go help your friend." After Emma and the doctor left, Prudence took a deep breath and surveyed the empty shop. She could do this. It was just a matter of helping customers, recording sales, and being polite, all things she'd been trained to do since childhood, albeit in a different context. The bell above the door jingled, and she turned with her best shopkeeper's smile to greet a tall, imposing man in an expensive suit. "Good afternoon, sir. How may I help you today?" The man looked around the shop with an air of ownership. "Where's Miss Xavier?" "She was called away on an urgent matter. I'm Miss Norton, her assistant. Can I help you with something?" His pale eyes assessed her in a way that made her skin crawl. Well, you're new in town. I make it my business to know everyone in Sweetwater, and I don't believe we've met." "Horace Blackstone at your service." He gave a small bow. "I own the bank, the hotel, and several other businesses in town." "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Blackstone," Prudence replied automatically, though something about the man set her nerves on edge. "Were you looking for something specific today?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Nothing in particular, just stopping by to remind Miss Xavier that her rent is due next week." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'd hate to see such a charming shop have to close its doors." The threat, veiled as it was unmistakable. Prudence straightened her spine, drawing on years of social training to keep her expression pleasant. "I'll be sure to pass along the message, though I believe Emma keeps her accounts in perfect order." Blackstone's smile tightened. "See that you do, Miss Norton. Sweetwater is a small town. It's important to stay on good terms with the right people." He placed his hat back on his head. "I look forward to seeing more of you." After he left, Prudence released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. There was something predatory about Horace Blackstone that reminded her uncomfortably of certain businessmen who had frequented her father's home, men who saw people as commodities rather than individuals. The rest of the afternoon passed without incident. Prudence sold 3 yards of calico to Mrs. Miller, Sarah's mother, and helped a rancher's wife select buttons for a new shirt she was making for her husband. When Jackson arrived just before closing time, she was counting the day's receipts with meticulous care. "Where's Emma?" he asked, looking around the empty shop. "Mrs. Dumont went into labor early. The doctor came for Emma hours ago." Prudence smiled up at him. "I've been managing the shop alone." A look of admiration crossed his face. "And how'd that go?" "Well enough, I think. Though I did have an unpleasant visit from Mr. Blackstone." Jackson's expression darkened. What did Blackstone want? He said he was here to remind Emma about the rent, but she hesitated. There was something about the way he said it that felt like a threat. That sounds like Blackstone. Jackson's jaw tightened. He's been trying to get his hands on this building for years, wants to tear it down and expand the hotel. Why doesn't he just raise the rent until Emma can't afford it? Because my sister owns this building outright. Our father left it to her in his will. Blackstone can't touch it, and it drives him crazy. A small, satisfied smile touched Jackson's lips. He's used to getting what he wants in this town. Relief washed over Prudence. "Oh, I misunderstood." He made it sound as though Emma was behind on payments to him. Classic Blackstone tactic. "He likes to intimidate newcomers." Jackson's eyes softened as they looked at her. "You seem to have handled him just fine." Prudence felt a flush of pride at his approval. "I may be new to Sweetwater, but I grew up in Boston society. I know how to deal with bullies in fine suits." Jackson laughed, a rich, warm sound that made her heart flutter. "I believe you do at that, Miss Norton." "Prudence," she corrected him softly. "If I'm to call you Jax, you should call me Prudence." Something shifted in his eyes, a warmth that hadn't been there before. "Prudence," he repeated, as if testing the feel of her name on his tongue. "It suits you." The moment stretched between them, taut with possibility, until the shop door burst open and Emma rushed in, looking exhausted but elated. "It's a boy," she announced. 8 pounds even and the loudest lungs in the territory. Maria and the baby are both doing well. She noticed the ledger open on the counter. How did the shop fare? Perfectly well, Prudence assured her. I sold some calico and buttons and Mr. Blackstone stopped by. Emma's smile faded. What did that snake want? He seemed to be under the impression that you owe him rent, Prudence explained. Jax clarified the situation for me. Blackstone thinks if he says something often enough, it'll become true. Emma sank into a chair, fatigue evident in every line of her body. I'm sorry you had to deal with him on your first day alone. I'm just glad I know the truth now. Prudence closed the ledger. You look exhausted. Why don't you go upstairs and rest? I can finish closing up. Emma hesitated, then nodded gratefully. That would be wonderful. Thank you, Prudence. She turned to her brother. Jax, are you staying in town tonight? There's stew left from yesterday. I should get back to the ranch, he said, though he looked reluctant. Got a new calf that needs watching. At least stay for supper, Prudence found herself saying. You came all this way into town. His eyes met hers, and something passed between them, a current of understanding, of mutual interest carefully banked but undeniably present. Well, when you put it that way, he said with a small smile, I suppose the calf can wait a bit longer. Supper was a simple affair, but the conversation flowed easily. Emma, despite her exhaustion, regaled them with the story of little Thomas Dumont's dramatic entry into the world, while Jackson shared news from the ranch and the latest gossip from the saloon. Marshall's still looking for those stage robbers, he mentioned as they finished their meal. Word is they hit another stage yesterday, closer to Cheyenne this time. Do they think it's the same men? Prudence asked. Jackson nodded. Same description, 2 men, faces covered, one with a distinctive limp. They're getting bolder. I hope they're caught soon, Emma said with a shiver. I don't like the idea of those men running loose. As the evening drew to a close, Jackson reluctantly rose to leave. I really should get back. Got an early start tomorrow driving some cattle to the north pasture. At the door, he paused and turned to Prudence. The social's tomorrow night. Would you allow me to escort you? Her heart gave a little leap. I would like that very much. His smile was like sunrise breaking over the plains. I'll come by around 6 then. After he left, Emma gave Prudence a knowing look. Told you he was interested. Prudence felt her cheeks warm. He's just being kind to a newcomer. Jax has never offered to escort anyone to a town social before, Emma countered. Not once in all the years we've lived here. Oh, Prudence said softly, her heart racing at the implication. Well, that's interesting. Emma laughed and linked her arm through Prudence's. Come on, let's finish your dress for tomorrow. If my brothers finally found a woman worth courting, we need to make sure you outshine every girl in Sweetwater. The social was held in the town square, with lanterns strung between trees and tables laden with food contributed by every household in Sweetwater. A small band played lively tunes on a makeshift stage, and children darted between the adults, their laughter adding to the festive atmosphere. Prudence smoothed the skirt of her new blue dress nervously as she and Emma approached the gathering. True to his word, Jackson had arrived at precisely 6 o'clock, hat in hand and wearing a clean white shirt under his best vest. The appreciative look in his eyes when he saw Prudence had made all Emma's fussing with the dress worthwhile. You look beautiful, he'd said simply, offering his arm. Now, as they entered the town square together, Prudence was acutely aware of the curious glances directed their way. Jackson Xavier escorting a newcomer to the social was evidently big news in Sweetwater. Everyone's staring, she whispered. Jackson squeezed her hand where it rested on his arm. Let them. They're just jealous. I've got the prettiest girl in town on my arm. The evening passed in a blur of introductions, dancing, and more food than Prudence had ever seen at one gathering. Jackson stayed by her side throughout, introducing her to ranchers and shopkeepers, to the marshal and the schoolteacher, to the reverend and his wife. Each person greeted her with varying degrees of curiosity and warmth, but Jackson's steady presence made even the most pointed questions bearable. So, Miss Norton, the reverend's wife asked during a lull in the dancing, what brings you all the way from Boston to our little town? Before Prudence could formulate a suitably vague response, Jackson smoothly intervened. Miss Norton came west seeking new opportunities, Mrs. Phillips. And we're mighty glad she did. Emma says she's the best assistant she's ever had. The older woman looked skeptical but nodded. Well, we're always happy to welcome new faces to Sweetwater. Will you be staying long? Prudence glanced at Jackson, finding unexpected courage in his supportive gaze. I believe I will, Mrs. Phillips. Sweetwater already feels more like home than I expected. As the evening wore on, the band struck up a waltz, a rare occurrence at the usually more informal frontier gatherings. Jackson held out his hand to Prudence. May I have this dance? She placed her hand in his, feeling the calluses that spoke of hard work and honest living. You may, Mr. Xavier. He led her to the cleared space serving as a dance floor, placing one hand properly at her waist while holding her other hand in his. I should warn you, he said with a self-deprecating smile, I'm not much of a dancer. Then I shall have to lead, she teased, and was rewarded with his low laugh. Despite his warning, Jackson moved with natural grace, guiding her through the steps of the waltz with surprising skill. As they turned about the floor, Prudence was aware only of his hand at her waist, the clean scent of soap and leather that clung to him, and the way his eyes never left hers. You dance beautifully for a man who claims no skill, she said as the music began to wind down. I have an excellent partner, he replied softly, makes all the difference. The moment was broken by a commotion near the food tables. Horace Blackstone, clearly in his cups, was arguing loudly with the marshal. It's your job to protect this town, Porter. Those robbers are making us all look like fools, Marshal Porter, a tall man with iron gray hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, kept his voice level. I'm doing everything I can, Blackstone. We've got men patrolling the main roads, but it's a lot of territory to cover. Not good enough. Blackstone slammed his fist on the table, causing plates to jump. My bank's gold shipment is due next week. If those thieves get their hands on it, perhaps this isn't the time or place for this discussion, the marshal interrupted, nodding toward the families gathered nearby. Blackstone's bloodshot eyes swept the crowd, landing on Prudence and Jackson. A sneer twisted his features. Well, if it isn't Xavier and the new girl, getting cozy are we? Jackson stiffened beside her. That's enough, Blackstone, you're drunk. And you're a fool if you think you can keep that ranch of yours afloat much longer. Blackstone's voice carried across the now silent gathering. One bad winter, one dry summer, and you'll be begging me for a loan like all the rest. Before Jackson could respond, Emma appeared at their side, her expression tight with anger. Mr. Blackstone, I believe you owe my brother and Miss Norton an apology. Blackstone laughed, an ugly sound. Do I now, for speaking the truth? Your brother's sitting on land that should be mine, and everyone knows it. That's enough, Marshal Porter said firmly, taking Blackstone's arm. Time for you to call it a night, Horace. As the marshal led the protesting banker away, whispers broke out among the townspeople. Jackson's jaw was clenched tight, his eyes hard as flint. I'm sorry about that, he said to Prudence. Blackstone's had it in for my family since we refused to sell him our land 5 years ago. You have nothing to apologize for, she assured him, placing a hand on his arm. Every town has its Horace Blackstone. In Boston, we just dress them better. Her attempt at humor succeeded in drawing a small smile from him. You're something else, Prudence Norton. The incident cast a shadow over the remainder of the evening, though the townspeople did their best to resume the festivities. As the hour grew late, Jackson suggested they leave. I'll walk you and Emma home, he said, offering Prudence his arm once more. The night air was cool after the warmth of the gathering, and Prudence shivered slightly in her light dress. Without a word, Jackson removed his coat and draped it around her shoulders. The weight of it was comforting, enveloping her in his warmth and scent. Emma, walking slightly ahead of them, suddenly stopped and patted her pockets. Oh, I've left my reticule at the social. You two go on ahead, I'll just run back and fetch it. Before either of them could protest, she had turned and hurried back toward the town square, leaving Prudence and Jackson alone in the moonlit street. Your sister is about as subtle as a stampeding buffalo, Jackson remarked dryly. Prudence laughed softly. She means well. They continued walking, their pace slowing naturally as they approached the dress shop. Neither seemed eager for the evening to end. "Thank you for escorting me tonight," Prudence said as they reached the door. "Despite Mr. Blackstone's behavior, I had a wonderful time." Jackson turned to face her, his expression serious in the silvery moonlight. "Prudence, I need to be honest with you. I know you've only been in Sweetwater a short time and you're still healing from what happened back east, but—" He took a deep breath. "I've never met anyone like you. And I'd like to court you properly if you'll allow it." The directness of his words took her breath away. In Boston, courtship was a dance of innuendo and subtle signals, of formal calls and chaperoned outings. Jackson's straightforward declaration was refreshingly honest. She hesitated, heart pounding. "I would like that very much, Jax." The smile that broke across his face was worth any uncertainty she might have felt. Yes, she confirmed, her own smile growing to match his. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. The gentle touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool night air. "I should go in," she said reluctantly. "Before Emma returns and finds us standing here like a pair of moonstruck fools." "Let her find us," Jackson murmured, his eyes dropping to her lips for a brief, telling moment. "I don't mind." But Prudence, despite her growing feelings for this man, wasn't quite ready to throw all propriety aside. "Good night, Jax," she said softly, slipping his coat from her shoulders and handing it back to him. He accepted it with a rueful smile. "Good night, Prudence, sweet dreams." As she closed the door behind her, Prudence leaned against it, her heart racing with emotions she'd never experienced with Harold or any other suitor. This breathless, giddy sensation was entirely new and entirely welcome. Over the next few weeks, Jackson courted Prudence with a dedication that both touched and surprised her. He visited the dress shop regularly, bringing small gifts and taking her for walks around town when the shop was quiet. On Sundays, after church, he escorted her and Emma to dinner at the hotel's dining room, the finest establishment in Sweetwater, though it paled in comparison to Boston's restaurants. Prudence found herself falling into the rhythms of frontier life with unexpected ease. The work at the dress shop was satisfying, giving her a sense of purpose she'd never experienced in her sheltered existence back east. Emma proved to be not just an employer but a true friend, teaching Prudence not only about dressmaking, but about the unwritten rules of Western society. "You don't need 3 forks to eat a meal," Emma explained when Prudence expressed shock at the hotel's simple table settings. "And out here, a woman who can shoot straight is more valued than one who can play the pianoforte, though both skills are admired." "I can't do either," Prudence admitted with a laugh. "Well, the pianoforte might be a lost cause unless Reverend Phillips lets you practice on the church's instrument, but shooting, that's something Jax can teach you." And teach her he did. One sunny Saturday, Jackson arrived at the shop with a picnic basket and a mysterious canvas-wrapped package. "I thought we might ride out to the creek today," he suggested. "It's a mighty pretty spot, and I've got something to show you." With Emma's enthusiastic blessing, Prudence found herself riding behind Jackson on his horse, her arms wrapped around his waist as they traveled the 5 miles to the Double X Ranch. The land was beautiful rolling grasslands dotted with wildflowers, backed by distant mountains that seemed to touch the endless blue sky. "This is all yours?" she asked, awed by the expanse of it. 800 acres, he confirmed, pride evident in his voice. "Not the biggest spread in the territory, but it's good land. Supports about 500 head of cattle right now, but I'm building the herd each year." At the ranch, he helped her down from his horse and led her to the corral, where a pretty bay mare watched them curiously. "This is Penny," Jackson said, stroking the horse's nose. "Gentlest mount on the ranch. I thought you might like to ride her instead of doubling up on Buck here." Prudence approached the mare cautiously. "I've never ridden before." "Not properly, at least just side saddle in the park with a groom leading the horse." Jackson looked scandalized. "That's not riding, that's being a passenger." He opened the gate and led Penny out. No time like the present to learn. What followed was a lesson in Western riding that left Prudence sore but exhilarated. Jackson was a patient teacher, showing her how to mount, how to hold the reins, how to use her legs to guide the horse. By the time they set off for the creek, She was sitting tall in the saddle, a tentative smile on her face as Penny followed Jackson's buck at a sedate walk. The creek was as pretty as Jackson had promised, a clear stream lined with cottonwood trees that provided welcome shade. They spread a blanket on the grassy bank and unpacked the picnic cold chicken, biscuits, apples, and a jar of lemonade. As they ate, Jackson told her about his dreams for the ranch, the improvements he wanted to make, the bloodstock he hoped to acquire to strengthen his herd, the house he planned to build to replace the small cabin he currently called home. "The cabin's fine for a bachelor," he explained, "but it's not fit for a family." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. Prudence felt her cheeks warm as she imagined herself as part of that future family, as mistress of the Double X Ranch, as Jackson Xavier's wife. After they'd eaten, Jackson unwrapped the canvas package to reveal a Winchester rifle. "Thought it was time for your first shooting lesson," he said, checking the weapon with practiced hands. "Every woman in these parts should know how to handle a firearm." Prudence eyed the rifle warily. "I've never even touched a gun before. Then we'll start with the basics." His voice was gentle but firm. "Out here, a gun isn't just for protection, though that's important too. It's also for putting food on the table." Under his careful instruction, Prudence learned how to hold the rifle, how to sight along the barrel, how to breathe steadily as she squeezed the trigger. Her first shot went wide of the target. He'd set up a tin can on a fallen log, but her second nicked the edge, and her third knocked it cleanly off the log. "You're a natural," Jackson exclaimed, his pride in her achievement evident. Prudence lowered the rifle, surprised by the sense of accomplishment flooding through her. "I did it," she said wonderingly. "You surely did." He took the rifle from her, set it aside, and then, without warning, pulled her into his arms. "Prudence Norton, you continue to amaze me." Before she could respond, his lips were on hers, warm, gentle, questioning. After a moment of surprise, Prudence found herself responding, her hands coming up to rest on his chest as she returned the kiss with shy enthusiasm. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the night of the social," he admitted. "I've been wanting you to," she confessed, feeling bold in a way she never had before. His smile was tender as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm falling in love with you, Prudence. I know it's fast, and if you need time, I understand, but I wanted you to know where I stand." The directness of his declaration took her breath away. Again, she was struck by the difference between this man and the suitors she'd known in Boston. There was no game playing with Jackson Xavier, no hidden agenda, just honest emotion offered freely. "I'm falling in love with you too, Jax," she whispered, the words feeling right and true as they left her lips. "I never expected to find someone like you, especially not after being left at the altar," he finished when she trailed off. "That man was a fool, Prudence. The biggest fool east of the Mississippi. But I can't help being grateful for his foolishness because it brought you here, to Sweetwater, to me." Their second kiss was deeper, less tentative, a promise of the future they both were beginning to envision. The ride back to town was filled with shared smiles and occasional brushes of their hands. Prudence felt as though she was floating, her heart lighter than it had been in months, perhaps ever. The humiliation of her failed wedding, the shame of being sent away by her family, the uncertainty of her future, all of it seemed to fade in importance next to the growing certainty that she had found where she belonged. As they approached Sweetwater, however, the sound of shouting reached them. Smoke rose from the direction of Main Street, and Jackson immediately urged Buck into a gallop, Prudence following as best she could on Penny. They arrived to chaos. A building on Main Street, the saloon, Prudence realized was engulfed in flames, and a bucket brigade was already in full swing, passing water from the town pump to the burning structure. "Stay here," Jackson ordered, jumping down from Buck and rushing to join the firefighting effort. Prudence dismounted more carefully, tethering both horses to a hitching post before hurrying toward the dress shop. Relief washed over her when she saw it was untouched by the fire, several buildings away from the saloon. Emma stood outside, her face pale as she watched the men fight the blaze. Prudence, thank goodness, I was worried when you weren't back yet. We just arrived, Prudence explained, hugging her friend. What happened? No one knows for sure. The fire started in the back room of the saloon. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. Marshall thinks it might have been set deliberately. Why would anyone do that? Saloon owner Pete Donovan testified against one of the Colton boys last month, got him sent to territorial prison for horse theft. Word is the Coltons swore revenge. The firefighting continued for hours, men passing buckets and battling the blaze while women provided water, bandages, and encouragement. By sunset, the fire was finally contained, though the saloon was a total loss and the adjacent feed store had suffered significant damage. Jackson found Prudence and Emma as darkness fell, his face streaked with soot, his clothes singed in places. Everyone's accounted for, he reported wearily. No serious injuries, thank God. Prudence handed him a dipper of water, which he drank gratefully. Marshall's calling a town meeting tomorrow, he continued after slaking his thirst. Says he has information about the stage robberies that can't wait. Do you think the fire and the robberies are connected? Emma asked. Jackson shrugged. Hard to say, but two serious crimes in our quiet town. Seems like more than coincidence. That night, Prudence lay awake in her bed above the dress shop, her mind racing. The events of the day had been a stark reminder that life on the frontier came with dangers she'd never had to consider in Boston. Yet when she thought about returning east, to the stifling social constraints and her parents' disappointment, she knew she couldn't do it. Despite the hardships, despite the dangers, Sweetwater had become home in a way Boston never truly had been, and Jackson. Jackson had become essential to her happiness in a way Harold never could have been. The town meeting was held in the church the next morning, the only building large enough to accommodate most of Sweetwater's residents. Marshall Porter stood at the pulpit, his expression grave as he surveyed the assembled townspeople. As you all know, we've had a string of stage robberies over the past few months, he began without preamble. What you may not know is that we received information yesterday that strongly suggests the culprits are local. A murmur ran through the crowd. The marshal held up his hands for silence. I'm not naming names until I have proof, but I want everyone to be on alert. The bank's gold shipment is due on Wednesday's stage. We have reason to believe the robbers plan to hit it hard. What are you going to do about it, Porter? Horace Blackstone demanded from the front pew. That's my bank's money at risk. I'm organizing additional security for the stage, the marshal replied evenly. I've wired for help from the territorial marshal's office, but I also need volunteers from town to ride escort. Hands went up throughout the church, including Jackson's. Prudence felt a cold knot of fear in her stomach at the thought of him facing armed robbers, but she kept her expression calm. This was his world, she reminded herself. Danger was part of frontier life, and she couldn't ask him to stand aside when his community needed him. After the meeting, as people filed out of the church, Prudence found herself face to face with Horace Blackstone. Miss Norton, he greeted her with an oily smile. I understand you've become quite close with Xavier. Mr. Xavier has been very kind to me since my arrival, she replied neutrally. Blackstone's smile didn't reach his eyes. Has he told you about his financial troubles? No, I'm not surprised. Pride is a powerful thing. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The double X is mortgaged to the hilt. One bad season and he loses everything. Before Prudence could respond, Jackson appeared at her side, his expression hard as he looked at Blackstone. Problem here? Not at all, the banker replied smoothly. Just having a friendly chat with the lovely Miss Norton. He tipped his hat to Prudence. Good day to you both. As he walked away, Prudence turned to Jackson. Is it true, about the mortgage? A muscle ticked in Jackson's jaw. I took out a loan last year to buy breeding stock. It's not unusual, most ranchers operate on credit of some kind. He took her hands in his. I'm not in danger of losing the ranch if that's what you're worried about. Blackstone's just trying to cause trouble. Relief washed over her. I wasn't worried about the ranch, I was worried about you. His expression softened. I'm fine, Prudence, and I'd be a lot better if you'd agree to have supper with me tonight, just the two of us. What about the stage robbery? That's not until Wednesday. Tonight I just want to spend time with the woman I love. He squeezed her hands gently. Will you come? How could she refuse such a request? Yes, she said simply. I would like that very much. Jackson picked her up just after sunset, dressed in his Sunday best, his hair still damp from washing. He looked handsome and nervous, a combination Prudence found endearing. Where are we going? She asked as he helped her into the buggy he'd borrowed for the occasion. It's a surprise, he replied with a secretive smile. He drove them out of town, following the creek that wound through the valley. As they crested a small rise, Prudence gasped in delight. Below them, on a flat stretch of land overlooking the water, a table had been set with a white cloth, candles, and what appeared to be a proper dinner service. How did you? I had some help, Jackson admitted as he guided the buggy down the slope. Emma loaned me the tablecloth and dishes. Mrs. Garcia at the cantina provided the food. As they drew closer, Prudence saw that a small fire had been built nearby, providing warmth against the evening chill. The table was indeed set beautifully, with wildflowers in a mason jar serving as a centerpiece. It's wonderful, she breathed as he helped her down from the buggy. Jackson looked pleased at her reaction. I wanted our first proper supper together to be special. He seated her at the table and served the meal tender beef in a rich sauce, beans with green chilies, fresh tortillas, and a bottle of wine that must have cost a small fortune this far from civilization. As they ate, they talked of everything and nothing: his plans for the ranch, her growing skill with Emma's sewing machine, the latest book they'd both read. It was easy, comfortable, yet tinged with an excitement that made Prudence's heart race whenever their eyes met across the candlelit table. After the meal, Jackson led her to a blanket spread near the fire. They sat side by side, watching the flames dance in the gathering darkness. I brought you out here for a reason, he said finally, turning to face her. I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Prudence's breath caught as he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. I love you, Prudence Norton. You came to Sweetwater as a disgraced bride, but all I saw was a woman of incredible strength and grace. He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band set with a small diamond. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears welled in Prudence's eyes. 6 weeks ago, she had stood in a church in Boston, abandoned by the man she thought she would marry, crushed by shame and her family's rejection. Now here she was being offered a new life, a new beginning by a man who saw her true worth. Yes, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, Jax, I will marry you. His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Emma helped with the size, he admitted. She measured your finger while you were sleeping. Prudence laughed through her tears. Sneaky. She's been rooting for us from the start. He cupped Prudence's face in his hands. I promise to spend the rest of my life making you happy, Prudence. You'll never regret taking a chance on me. I could never regret it, she assured him, placing her hands over his. You gave me a new life when I thought mine was over. A new dress, a new purpose, a new home. She smiled up at him, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. A new beginning. Their kiss sealed the promise, tender and sweet and full of hope for the future they would build together. The next 2 days passed in a blur of happiness for Prudence. Emma was ecstatic about the engagement, immediately beginning plans for a wedding dress that would, she declared, make every woman in Sweetwater green with envy. The townspeople offered congratulations when the news spread, seeming genuinely pleased for the couple with the notable exception of Horace Blackstone, who merely offered a tight smile and cold eyes when he encountered them on the street. But as Wednesday approached, a shadow fell over their joy. Jackson, true to his word, would be riding with the posse to protect the stage carrying the bank's gold shipment. Though he downplayed the danger, Prudence couldn't help but worry. It's just a precaution, he assured her the night before, as they sat on the bench outside the dress shop, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Marshal Porter's got 10 men riding escort. The robbers would be fools to try anything. Then why go at all? She asked, unable to keep the fear from her voice. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over the engagement ring that still felt new and wondrous on her finger. Because it's my duty. This is my home, these are my neighbors. I can't ask other men to risk themselves while I stay safe in town. She knew he was right, knew this was part of the life she had chosen by accepting his proposal, but it didn't ease the cold knot of fear in her stomach. "Just promise me you'll be careful," she said, leaning her head against his shoulder. He pressed a kiss to her hair. "I promise. I've got too much to live for now." Morning came too soon. Prudence rose before dawn to see Jackson off, pressing a small token into his hand as he prepared to mount Buck. "What's this?" he asked, looking down at the handkerchief she'd embroidered with his initials. "For luck," she explained, standing on tiptoe to kiss him one last time. "Come back to me, Jax." His eyes were serious as they met hers. "Always." The posse rode out as the sun crested the eastern hills, 10 men heading north to meet the stage at the territorial boundary. Prudence watched until they disappeared from sight, then turned back to the dress shop, determined to keep busy rather than give in to worry. The day dragged endlessly. Prudence helped customers, worked on a new display for the shop window, and even began preliminary sketches for her wedding dress. But nothing could distract her completely from thoughts of Jackson facing danger. It was late afternoon when they heard the shots, distant at first, then closer, accompanied by the thunder of hooves. Prudence and Emmer rushed to the shop door just as the stage came barreling down Main Street, the driver whipping the horses into a frenzied gallop. Behind it rode several men, guns drawn, exchanging fire with pursuers still out of sight. "Get inside," Emma ordered, pulling Prudence back into the shop. "That's not just the posse." They retreated to the back room, where Emma pulled a shotgun from beneath the counter. "Stay here," she instructed, checking that the weapon was loaded. "I'm going to see what's happening." "I'm coming with you," Prudence insisted. When Emma began to protest, she added, "Jax is out there. I need to know if he's safe." Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Stay behind me." They cautiously made their way to the front of the shop, peering out the window at the chaos in the street. The stage had stopped in front of the bank, and men were hurriedly unloading the strongbox under the direction of Marshal Porter. Of the posse, Prudence could see only 6 men, including the marshal. "Where's Jax?" she whispered, scanning the faces desperately. Before Emma could answer, more riders appeared at the end of the street, 3 men, faces covered with bandanas, guns blazing as they charged toward the bank. "It's the robbers," someone shouted, and the marshal and his men took up defensive positions, returning fire. Townspeople scattered, seeking shelter as bullets flew. Prudence watched in horror as one of the posse members fell, clutching his shoulder. The robbers continued their charge, seemingly undeterred by the opposition. Then, from a side street, came another rider, Jackson, his face streaked with dirt and what looked like blood, but very much alive. He fired his rifle with deadly accuracy, hitting one of the robbers and sending him tumbling from his horse. The remaining 2 robbers split up, one continuing toward the bank while the other wheeled to face this new threat. Prudence's heart stopped as she saw the robber take aim at Jackson. "Jax." She screamed, though she knew he couldn't hear her through the glass and the gunfire. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The robber fired, Jackson's horse reared, and then Jackson was falling, hitting the ground hard as Buck bolted away. Without thinking, Prudence ran for the door, ignoring Emma's shout to stay back. She had to reach him, had to know if he was alive. Nothing else mattered. She was halfway across the street when strong arms grabbed her, pulling her behind the cover of a water trough. It was Dr. Franklin, his expression grim. "Stay down, Miss Norton, it's not safe." "Jackson's hurt," she cried, struggling against his hold. "I have to get to him." "You can't help him by getting yourself killed," the doctor said firmly. "Wait until it's over." The gunfight raged for what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only minutes. Finally, Marshal Porter's voice rang out. "Drop your weapons, it's over." Prudence peered over the edge of the trough to see the last robber standing with his hands raised, his gun on the ground. The marshal was advancing cautiously, his own weapon trained on the man. "Is it safe?" she asked Dr. Franklin. He nodded grimly. "Seems so. Go to him. I'll be right behind you." Prudence ran to where Jackson lay motionless in the street, her heart in her throat. As she reached him, he groaned and opened his eyes, blinking up at her in confusion. "Prudence, what are you doing here?" Relief made her knees weak. You're alive, she gasped, falling to her knees beside him. Takes more than a fall from a horse to kill me, he mumbled, trying to sit up. Buck spooked when the shooting started. I don't think I was hit, just knocked the wind out of me. Dr. Franklin arrived and began examining Jackson, his practiced hands checking for injuries. No bullet wounds, he confirmed after a moment. Likely some bruised ribs from the fall, maybe a concussion. Let's get you to my office to be sure. With the doctor's help, Prudence got Jackson to his feet. He swayed slightly but remained upright, one arm draped over her shoulders for support. The robbers, he asked, looking toward the bank. Marshall got them, Dr. Franklin replied. One dead, two in custody. As they made their way slowly toward the doctor's office, Marshall Porter approached, his expression grave. Xavier, glad to see you're in one piece. You missed quite a revelation. What do you mean? Jackson asked, wincing as he straightened. The marshal glanced around, then lowered his voice. The robbers were working for someone in town, someone who knew exactly when the gold shipment would arrive. Blackstone, Jackson said immediately. It was Blackstone, wasn't it? Porter nodded grimly. One of the men talked as soon as we had him in cuffs. Said Blackstone hired them to rob the stages, make it look like outside bandits. He's been skimming from his depositors for years, using the robberies to cover the shortfalls. I knew that snake was dirty, Jackson muttered. Where is he now? In my jail, along with his hired guns. The marshal's expression was hard. Judge rides circuit next week. Blackstone will be facing serious charges. The news about Blackstone spread through town like wildfire. By evening, when Jackson had been patched up by the doctor and was resting in Emma's parlor above the shop, it seemed everyone in Sweetwater knew that their supposedly respectable banker had been orchestrating the stage robberies all along. I still can't believe it, Emma said as she served tea to Prudence and her brother. Horace Blackstone, of all people, he always acted so superior, like he was better than the rest of us. Men like Blackstone think the rules don't apply to them, Jackson said, shifting carefully on the sofa to avoid aggravating his bruised ribs. He probably thought he'd never get caught. Prudence sat beside him, unwilling to be more than an arm's length away after the fright she'd had. What will happen to the bank? Marshall says there's a junior partner coming from Cheyenne to sort things out, Jackson replied. Hopefully folks won't lose their savings. And the double X, Prudence asked quietly. You said your loan was through Blackstone's bank. Jackson took her hand, his thumb brushing over her engagement ring. We'll be fine, Prudence. The loan is legitimate even if Blackstone isn't. I've never missed a payment. That night, after Jackson had been settled in the guest room that Emma insisted he use rather than making the ride back to the ranch, Prudence sat by her window, watching the stars and reflecting on the events of the day. She had nearly lost Jackson, had seen firsthand the dangers of frontier life. Yet rather than making her question her decision to stay in Sweetwater, the experience had only strengthened her resolve. This was where she belonged, not despite the hardships, but because of the way this community faced them together. In Boston, she had been surrounded by people yet utterly alone. Here she had found true friendship, true purpose, and true love. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Jackson, looking pale but determined, leaning against the doorframe. You should be resting, she scolded gently. Couldn't sleep, he admitted. Keep thinking about today, about how close I came to losing everything. She drew him into the room, helping him to the chair by the window. But you didn't. You're safe. Blackstone is in jail. It's not the ranch I'm worried about losing, he said, taking her hands in his. It's you. When those shots started flying, all I could think about was getting back to you, and then when I saw you running into the street. He shook his head, his expression anguished. Prudence, if anything had happened to you. Nothing did, she assured him, squeezing his hands. We're both safe. That's all that matters. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles just above the engagement ring. I want to marry you as soon as possible. I don't want to wait. Her heart swelled with love for this man who had given her a second chance at happiness. Then we won't wait. As soon as you're healed, next week, he interrupted. When the circuit judge is in town, he can marry us. Prudence laughed softly. Emma will be devastated if she doesn't have time to finish my wedding dress. She can make you the fanciest dress in the territory for you to wear after we're married, Jackson countered, his eyes serious despite his light tone. What do you say, Prudence Norton? Will you marry me next week? Looking into those blue eyes, Prudence couldn't imagine saying anything but yes. I will. I would marry you tomorrow if we could find someone to perform the ceremony. His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. Next week it is, then. True to their word, Prudence and Jackson were married the following Thursday by the circuit judge, in a simple ceremony at the church in Sweetwater. Emma, though she had protested the rushed timeline, had worked miracles to create a beautiful ivory dress for Prudence, adorned with the lace salvaged from her original wedding gown, a fitting symbol of how her past had been transformed into something new and precious. The entire town turned out for the wedding, filling the small church to capacity. Even Mrs. Perkins, who had been Prudence's most vocal critic upon her arrival, dabbed at her eyes during the vows. I, Jackson Richard Xavier, take thee, Prudence Elizabeth Norton, to be my lawfully wedded wife, Jackson said, his voice strong and sure as he looked into her eyes. To have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. When it was her turn, Prudence's voice trembled with emotion as she repeated the vows. I, Prudence Elizabeth Norton, take thee, Jackson Richard Xavier, to be my lawfully wedded husband. To have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. By the authority vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, the judge pronounced, I now declare you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Jackson's kiss was tender but thorough, drawing cheers and a few good-natured whistles from the assembled townsfolk. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors as husband and wife, Prudence felt a sense of completion, of rightness, that she had never expected to find when she'd stepped off that stagecoach just 6 weeks earlier. The celebration afterward was held in the town square, with tables groaning under the weight of food contributed by every household in Sweetwater. There was dancing and laughter, toasts and good wishes, and through it all, Jackson kept Prudence close, as if he couldn't quite believe she was truly his. As the sun began to set, they slipped away from the festivities, boarding the buggy that would take them to the Double X Ranch to their home. Jackson had spent the past week, despite his injuries, preparing the cabin for his bride with Emma's help. He hadn't allowed Prudence to see it, insisting it be a surprise. Ready, Mrs. Xavier? He asked as he helped her into the buggy. The name sent a thrill through her. I've been ready since the day I met you, Mr. Xavier. The 5-mile journey to the ranch passed quickly, filled with shared smiles and occasional kisses. As they approached the cabin, Prudence gasped in delight. The simple structure had been transformed with fresh paint, new curtains in the windows, and a profusion of wildflowers planted along the path to the door. It's not much compared to what you're used to in Boston, Jackson said, suddenly uncertain as he helped her down from the buggy. But it's solid and warm, and she silenced him with a kiss. It's perfect. It's our home. He grinned, reassured, then swept her into his arms. And this, he said, carrying her to the door, is how a groom properly brings his bride over the threshold. Inside, the cabin was simple but cozy, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, and a separate bedroom. Emma's touch was evident in the cheerful curtains and the colorful quilt on the bed, but there were also signs of Jackson's care: a bookshelf filled with volumes he knew she would enjoy, a small writing desk by the window, a rocking chair by the fireplace. I love it, Prudence said, turning to her husband with shining eyes. I love you. Jackson gathered her in his arms, his expression tender. Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier. In that moment, with his arms around her and their future stretching bright before them, Prudence knew she had found what she had always been seeking without even knowing it: not the social approval her parents had prized so highly, not the secure but passionless match they had arranged with Harold, but this: a true partnership, a deep and abiding love, a home where she was valued for exactly who she was. She had come to Sweetwater as a disgraced bride, sent away in shame. But Jackson Xavier had given her so much more than just a new dress. He had given her a new beginning, a new life, and a love that would sustain them through whatever challenges lay ahead. And as the stars came out over the Wyoming plains, Prudence knew that this man, this home, this life was exactly where she was meant to be. 10 years later, the Double X Ranch had grown to become one of the most prosperous in the territory. The small cabin had been replaced by a handsome 2-story house, with wide porches and plenty of room for the 3 Xavier children: 8-year-old Thomas, 6-year-old Margaret, and 3-year-old Rebecca. Prudence stood on the front porch, watching as Jackson taught Thomas how to rope a calf in the corral nearby. Her son's face was set in the same look of determined concentration that his father often wore, his small hands gripping the rope just as Jackson had shown him. "Mama, look." Margaret called from the garden, where she was helping Emma plant the spring vegetables. "I put in all the carrots." "Well done, sweetheart," Prudence called back, smiling at her daughter's pride in her accomplishment. Emma, who divided her time between her dress shop in town and the ranch, straightened and wiped her brow. In the years since Prudence and Jackson's wedding, she had become more than a sister-in-law. She was Prudence's dearest friend, a beloved aunt to the children, and an indispensable part of their family. Life on the frontier remained challenging at times. There had been harsh winters that threatened the cattle, dry summers that withered the crops, even a fire 2 years prior that had destroyed one of the barns. But through it all, the love that had bloomed so unexpectedly between a disgraced Eastern bride and a Wyoming rancher had only grown stronger, deeper, more resilient. "Thinking deep thoughts, Mrs. Xavier." Jackson's voice interrupted her reverie as he joined her on the porch, little Rebecca perched on his shoulders. Prudence smiled up at her husband, noting the silver just beginning to thread through his hair at the temples. The years had been kind to him, adding character to his handsome face without diminishing his vitality. "Just counting my blessings," she replied, reaching up to take their youngest daughter into her arms. "They're too numerous to name." Jackson slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her close as they watched Thomas successfully throw his rope around the practice calf's neck. "He's got a natural talent," he said proudly. "Like his mother." Prudence laughed. "I don't recall being particularly talented with a lasso." "I wasn't talking about roping cattle," Jackson said, his voice soft as he gazed down at her. "I was talking about how naturally you took to life out here, how you faced every challenge with grace and courage, how you made this place a true home." Even after 10 years of marriage, his words could still make her heart skip a beat. "We made it a home together, Jax." He bent to kiss her, a tender gesture full of the love and partnership they had built over the years. "Best decision I ever made," he murmured against her lips, giving a disgraced bride a new dress and a chance at a new beginning. Prudence smiled into the kiss, her heart full to bursting with gratitude for the life they had created together. "And the best decision I ever made was taking that chance." As the Wyoming sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, the Xavier family gathered on the porch of their home, a testament to the power of love to heal wounds, to create joy from sorrow, and to build something beautiful and lasting from the most unexpected of beginnings.